I'm stripping all the paint off to get down to the fiberglass.
Oh, the rotten wood.
Some sort of extremely sticky and very viscous super glue. This was probably the most annoying part of the process so far.
Got a big old crack. This is all kind of separating. Well, the more I dig, the more I find. Yikes. It's just soft wood. Okay, I think I got it cut out the way I want. I am very impressed with myself. Alright, looking pretty good.
So picking up right where we left off, this is part 3 of my Craigslist center console restoration series, and you're gonna see some major improvements in this video.
Alright, fiberglass time. Time to do some epoxy. Here we go.
So I'm using a 2-part Total Boat epoxy. Requires a whole lot of mixing, and then I'm applying it on top of that new plywood section and 2x4 section that I put in the last part. Keep in mind, this is my first time fiberglassing anything. All I know is what I've read and watched online, so please don't hate on me in the comments. I would appreciate any and all suggestions for next time though. In retrospect, it may have been a good idea to use woven fiberglass over the chop strand, which is what I'm using here. That's because the chop strand is very hard to work with. When you don't cut it very clean, the edges get all frayed and they want to just come off and bunch up together when it touches that very viscous epoxy. In the end, it turns out a lot better than it looks here, and you'll see, but I'm not worried about flat edges and making everything perfect and shiny, because that's not the vibe of this boat. It needs some bumps and bends to maintain its character. After I applied a layer or two, I used a little metal roller to make sure all the air bubbles were out. It was going to be an impossible task to get every little air bubble out just because of the corners and how uneven the surface I'm working with is, but it actually turned out okay. And for my first time fiberglassing, I'm more than happy with it.
My first time fiberglassing, I'd say that's pretty good. That's not air bubbles, that's just the color, but pretty good. A solid layer around. I'm gonna let it cure and see what it looks like after it hardens, and then probably put a few more layers on there. It's been a few days, but I got the fiberglass work done and sanded down. That's why it kind of looks like that. All 4 sides. Fiberglass down. Got some dust on it because I've done sanding since then, but corner and all the way down there as well. So what I have now is this fairing compound. I'm going to use that to fair the surface up, get this nice and perfectly flat because it kind of goes in a little bit around the edges, around this area, and get it ready for painting. So let's go ahead and do that.
Part A and part B, which is the hardener. I think it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. Yep, 1-to-1 ratio. Sounds pretty simple.
So another thing I could have done better here was order about 3 or 4 times the amount of fairing compound as I have here.
Part B is blue.
I end up using all of both containers. But to get a smooth surface from the fairing compound on top of the chopped strand requires a pretty solid layer of this stuff. So this stuff is pretty expensive, and other than looking good, it doesn't have a real structural purpose. So I just accepted that those clumpy areas of chopped strand fiberglass are probably just not going to look perfect, and that's okay.
Got these cheap little disposable paint putty knives. Yeah, that's much better. They make each part a different color. Part A is yellow and part B is blue, so that you can kind of tell when the mixing is done, because it'll turn green, which is helpful. You can see now it's pretty green. I can start applying.
So you can see that right side of the console has an indent where I pulled that piece of fiberglass off from part 1. My idea was to fill that with fairing compound to get it flat, but I quickly realized that was not going to happen if I wanted to save some for the rest of the boat. So as I mentioned, I just went around sparsely, adding in fairing compound kind of everywhere, just focusing on the really, really rough areas.
All right, did all the fairing. Did the inside as well. Back there, back there, back there. Did a bunch of it there. Yeah, wait for it to dry now.
So the next morning, after the fairing compound was completely dry, I sanded it all down so the parts that I covered were completely smooth, and then it was time to move on to what I've been waiting weeks for. I ordered a gallon of Total Boat Wet Edge topside paint, and this is what I was going to use to paint the console. This is definitely the most satisfying part of the video. Well, this and when I paint the deck later on. You'll notice times when certain parts of the progress is undocumented, and that's because I was enjoying myself so much it was hard to set up the camera every time I did something. And yeah, right off the bat, you can see that area of chop strand that I didn't put fairing compound on, this kind of bubbling down and away from the plywood piece I put in. I actually feel like it becomes less visible as I do a couple different layers, and once I put a cooler seat in front of the console, hint hint, it's really not even that noticeable. And again, I'm totally okay with that. I'm sorry, it's definitely far from perfect. But yeah, the front of the console, which I had spent so long on, is really coming together now. No more metal plates securing it to the deck, and it's got some fresh paint. So let's jump ahead a little bit and you can see what the whole console looks like painted. Well, I haven't filmed in like a week, but I've gotten a lot done, so I'll show you.
So I painted pretty much the whole console at this point.
So I'll show you a little before and after here. So this is what the starboard side looked like before, and here's what it looks like now. Here's what the inside of the T-top looked like before, and here's what it looks like now. And here's what the front of the console looked like before, and here's what it looks like now. Keep in mind I have not painted the deck yet, so the bottom will look better in the future.
Looking good.
One last thing to do cosmetically, and that's paint the deck. So let's do some pressure washing, and then let's get painting.
Got this nice and pressure washed. May not look like it, but compared to before, it's 10 times better. And this is just stained on the paint. You can see it gets worse as you go up, just haven't done the front. And here's all the debris. Before, after. Not bad, this is gonna look good. I did a little test patch here, what the gunnels are gonna look like. I think that's gonna look real nice. And I got some non-skid deck paint on the way to do the deck. Yeah, console looking nice.
I want to make sure that the deck is perfectly dry, so I gave it plenty of time after pressure washing before painting.
The weather strip on the windows. Getting the sides painted. Looking good. That's what I'm gonna paint the deck with. Let's begin painting. Whew.
So I'm using the Total Boat Total Tread non-skid deck paint, and that has those little crystals. I don't know exactly what's in it, but when it dries, it provides a lot of traction when you're walking on it, especially when it's wet. So I'm covering the big areas with a paint roller. You can see I've covered all the areas I don't want to paint with painter's tape, and then I'm getting all the edges with just a 2-inch paintbrush. And this is really the step that made the most difference by far, just because the last time the deck was repainted on this boat, I probably wasn't even alive.
So by pressure washing and sanding and then giving it a nice coat, it really brings the whole thing to life. I was initially worried that the paint underneath, since some of it was chipping, would just bring up the new paint with it. But I really took my time and made sure all the old paint that was free from the fiberglass underneath it was taken off. So after 2 or 3 coats of this non-skid deck paint on top, I can be sure that at least for the next few years to come, I won't have any issues with the old paint underneath it flaking off and bringing that new layer away with it.
Looking pretty good. See before and after.
So at this point, I've painted from the console rearward, and you can notice what a tremendous difference it makes compared to the deck at the bow. It just looks like a completely different boat. So I was so excited when I started actually seeing what it was going to look like. From the start, this is what I was most excited to do, and I still was blown away by the difference it made. Just gotta reattach the console door, and let's take a quick look at what the interior used to look like. And what it looks like now. So I'm feeling pretty good about it, and I think I have done enough that I deserve to take her out for a day of fishing. So I'm gonna fire her up. And tomorrow I'm gonna head out with a few buddies for her official maiden voyage.
Beautiful day.
El Capitan.
It was a beautiful day. She handled well, and at the end we came home with some bluefish to make a smoked bluefish pate, flounder, or fluke as we call them in Massachusetts, and some black sea bass. I even caught a pufferfish, which was a fun surprise. And my brother even hooked into a 3 or 4 foot long dogfish.
Oh my god.
Might come on.
Oh my god. Holy crap. Oh yeah, now I see it. Oh my god.
There it is.
Oh my god.
Dude, it's a dogfish. It's a massive dogfish. Yes. I'm gonna try and get it head first in the net if I can. And we'll try and land it and bring it on the boat.
We were just fishing for small bottom fish. 10-pound test in a tiny little net never works well for a squirmy dogfish.
Oh my god, it's big.
Oh my god.
Oh, there it goes.
No.
We saw it though.
So yeah, that's where I am right now with the boat. If you have any suggestions for improvements I should make in the future, please reach out. I'm open to any and all suggestions. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video.